So if anyone has any questions for the short pitch presenters, please use either the meeting mojo, I've just reposted the link into the chat, or use the chat. I have a question for you, Ricard. You put a question into the Q&A, and I wasn't sure who it was aimed at. So your question was, have you considered malicious data sources, as I've still got you on the line? Who was that a question to?
So it was just the presenter before me. I don't remember his name. He was talking about federated learning.
Yes, from Newcastle. And my brain has gone completely dead on me as well.
Jamie,
so
Jamie McQuire, exactly.
Yes. Jamie, you still around? Yeah. So the question to you, as you see, is, have you considered malicious data sources? Was the question Ricard had for you. Just thought I'd quickly ask that because we've got a couple of minutes.
Is that it?
Yep.
Yeah, so we haven't considered malicious data sources yet, but I know there's a bit of work in federated learning with people who've explored data poisoning attacks. So it seems like there has to be a sort of incentive mechanism involved when training an actual system.
Great. Okay. Thanks very much. I have posted, there's a number of questions have come in on the Q&A for the short presenters. I've posted them all into the chat. It looks like most of them have been answered, but if our presenters would like to have a look into the chat box, which you can get by clicking at the symbol on the bottom of your Zoom bar, it'll appear on your right hand side, just to see if there's anything pointed at you. I say I've put the meeting mojo in there and people can connect to each other. If anyone doesn't manage to connect to someone, they can contact me or the KTN via the events team that have contacted you and ask to be connected, and then we'll try and help you in the background post-event. I'm now going to come on to a short panel session for Q&A. I must say, you've been like lightning in the background answering nearly all of the questions which have appeared. So if anyone has any questions, we do have some time. I've got a couple of questions that have come in that I'm going to ask live now. Both are for Victor, so you've lucked in there, Victor. The first one is a quick one, possibly, which is, is this considered a medical device, your asthma?
Yes, it's actually classified as an IVD, intravenous IVD diagnostic. Great.
So hopefully that's answers Stelios's question. And then the next question, again for you, Victor, has come from someone I've known for a while, Sergio. And he said, well, actually, this is an open question to other speakers as well. What is the AI part of your development? So to elaborate, many methods in this field are data-driven, where outputs depend on parameters that have been learned or derived from training. Are people equating AI with deep neural networks? So that's actually a question to everyone, but I'll start with Victor.
I think the reason we've implemented deep neural networks is that what we're trying to understand is what we need to measure, or what's different between different subtypes of asthma that can be indicative of an asthma attack. So even though the person would use the device, it would be personalized, and you use the DNN to learn what are the changes or deterioration in their asthma. All this information would be eventually collected through a hybrid model of looking at many different patients. So it would personalize for the user, but then you'll be collecting data using this device from other patients. So you're using a combination of a deep learning personalized unit plus machine learning on many patients' data to combine that to more accurately predict an asthma attack.
Okay, so I suppose the question goes to Matt and Elizabeth as well. Is it deep neural networks? Is it machine learning? Is it AI? How do you see the difference in these and what you're applying? Matt? I think we may have lost Matt. Yes, I think we've lost him.
Yeah, he's not online.
Right. I'm glad I'm not the only one whose internet provider hates them today. So So I think we've answered Sergio's question there. I think I've got gonna have a quick look to see if anything else has come in over here on the chat. Okay, so that's a question for. Okay, so there's a question coming for Victor again, but I've got a question for. I think actually this could be for Elizabeth, Victor, and Nicholas. Really, it's around what do you see or what have you discovered as the principal regulatory challenges in achieving adoptions of new technologies? So especially where you're putting AI machine learning into embedding it into devices, what are the key regulatory challenges that people are facing? So Nicholas and Elizabeth, if I ask you from a general principle of what are you finding within the community you're talking to?
Yes, Simon. Yeah, basically we are at the convergence of medical regulation, but also of privacy regulation, and that's what is making the world topic around regulation quite difficult, because you have to comply with quite tough medical regulation from the medical device regulation, for instance, which has been reviewed for some time ago, which is highly regulated and on national basis. With, for instance, GDPR regulation. So there's some challenges indeed here in how to comply with both sides of regulations. Yeah, that's
okay. Elizabeth, do you have any thoughts on this? You're on mute, by the way.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
I have nothing to add because I'm not the expert in this kind of regulations. For my
no, that's fine. I just didn't know if you had any anecdotal conversations.
No.
No worries then. So, Victor, how are you finding this? Are you coming up against any big regulatory challenges? Any ones that stick out particularly to you?
No, I think, as you said, there's obviously personal privacy of data, how that's being used. But I think what you've got to be really clear is a value proposition. So if you can give somebody a device and you can demonstrate to them it can really improve their health, I think although you have to build into the system, which we already have during the login, it's all protected for general data protection, and everything we do is made sure it's protected to meet regulatory requirements. I think the adoption challenge is not so much around the regulatory, it's going to be around the real value of using something based around AI that can predict and prevent you becoming ill. And I think the value proposition maybe is something we have to, as a company, focus on. Many people we've had from focus groups are really positive about having the technology, and I don't think they're so concerned about the personal data accessibility, although that is an issue. They're more concerned about having something that's really going to change and improve their quality of life.
Okay, oh, good. Question for you, Victor, on your particular application came in. Does the user had to have had an attack in order for the learning, or can it take learning from other users, if that makes sense?
What we do is that each person, ideally, even if they've had an attack, if you think about how the device actually is going to work, is that the first day you use it, it has very limited information in terms of potential ranges, sensor outputs that you can put in the system and say that you'd know that potentially if you have an asthma attack, these sensor outputs would be definitely changed. For example, your Excel flow rate would be very low. So you can start to do that. And I think what we've learned so far, it takes about 3 to 5 days to train it using your personal data. So even though if you've had an asthma attack, it doesn't limit that. What it's trying to do is customize it for you as an individual. And that's where I think the value of the deep neural networks is trying to learn what are your normal levels and what are your levels that could be leading to an asthma attack.
Great, thank you. So got a couple of questions in the Q&A over here that haven't been answered yet. So there's one that's come in from Mary asking about haptics, but I believe that was Matt Holsworth who was the main person talking about haptics and touch sensing. But I'm going to ask the question and see if anyone has any thoughts on it. So haptics as a route to user engagement was mentioned earlier. Would any of the speakers care to comment on how they, if they work with the textile industry on those sorts of aspects in their product? Also looking at challenges faced to overcoming the integration of electronics. So I don't think anyone on the line is dealing with materials specifically in their electronics, but I'll give people a sec to take themselves off mute if they are.
Yeah, Simon, I could take that. Nicholas here.
Okay,
that's
yeah,
true. We are not directly dealing with textiles. That's true. But and that's exactly the reason why we have some ties and a close relation to the textile industry through a similar structure as EPoSS, so the European Technology Platform. We are working with Subsea, that's a sport innovation platform, which deals with more the applicative side of sports. So, and textile is one of it. And for instance, we organize our last annual forum together with the sport people, so that we can have this interface between smart system integration and textiles, for instance. Yeah, so we are not the textile guys, but we do have, through collaboration, have access to this particular field.
Great. Okay. So if Marie's still listening on this call, I've just looked up who I think you are on LinkedIn. I will drop you a line with a couple of UK companies that that we're aware of in the KTN. Infotex is one that's doing textiles that are touch sensitive that have a medical application. And there's also a sports company using textile wearables for sensing. So I can send you some details on those companies and what they're doing as a follow-up later after the event. So an interesting question, I think, for Victor and in specifically, but also I think Nicholas and Elizabeth may have some thoughts. Polluted databases, so data lakes for AI training. Have you come across any issues or had to take into considerations how to avoid having those problems and giving you false information when you've been looking at when people have been looking at setting up systems in the first place?
Hi, I think specifically for our device, we'll be utilizing data that's actually come from people using the technology, because we're collecting unique biomarkers and we're collecting other lung function measurements. So I'd say we wouldn't face that because we're tending to learn more from the use of the device rather than using external data sources. The only rare area we might use external data sources is pollution, air pollution. So we'd like to obviously see how air pollution changes or affects as another trigger for asthma attacks.
Great. Okay. I mean, so Nicholas and Elizabeth, has data purity or data security or trustability come up as anything that's been discussed in conversations that have been happening in the people that you've been bumping into?
Well, basically, I'm not a data scientist, so I can't. What I can say is smart systems and electronics is important to generate the data, to transmit the data, and so on. So trustworthy electronics is definitely a field of defined as a strategy for the future. That's for sure. And what I wanted to say, yeah, that's why we see also a field of application for AI at the edge as explainable AI, yeah? so that we can reconstruct how the AI is working and based on facts. Yeah, so that's basically how we see from the data generation side how we could avoid at least pollution.